boys initiate a teensy-weensy bust as Jerome Powell's potentially final 25 basis point hike comes through. And immediately, two more banks are on the verge of complete and utter dumpulation. But are the Bitcoin bears doomed to suffer through a massive bust above 30,000 US dollars? Or will the little baby bears have the last laugh after all? Right now, the world just saw what is potentially the final rate hike of this cycle, as the banks are continuing to get crunched and munched, diddled from beyond. And the best part of it all, if you love the banks, is that we haven't seen the full effect of these rate hikes just yet. In fact, I would assume maybe we've seen half of the effects of the rate hikes. So this is going to get extremely dirty, downright potentially disgusting. And what is Bitcoin doing? Well, it's been doing what it's been doing for the past 2 months, which is have a little itsy bitsy baby pump. But is this going to be a short-lived pump? Will Bitcoin have the chance to break 30K? Or in fact, is something much bigger about to happen to the Moon Boys? And get these limited time massive deposit bonuses and 0 fees when trading spot using my links below if you are interested in trading. And without any further ado, let's jump into what surely will be something truly mesmerizing. So currently, I want to take a look at what happened, a quick summary of today. So the Fed potentially just ended the most aggressive tightening cycle in history. And according to Holger Shapitz here on Twitter, at least the markets expect the Fed to cut rates from here on out. And the market actually sees federal funds rates 75 basis points lower by the end of 2023. So will that happen? Will it not? Again, my opinion is, as I said, for the past few weeks, as everyone has said, everyone knew a 25 basis point hike was coming. But my opinion was that, they obviously should have stopped. They, as I've been saying for months, actually well over a year now, they started hiking the rates way too late, about 8 months too late. And I believe they've been too aggressive now with the rate hikes, and we haven't seen the full effects yet. Pretty much it comes down to this. How many dead and dying banks will JP Morgan have to buy? How many can they buy, right? That's kind of like what this boils down to. Also, as we see, literally just an hour after the FOMC meeting today, PacWest Bancorp shares tumble about 50% on reports that it's weighing strategic options. In after-hours trading as well. I believe the after-hours trading we saw on PacWest in a very short amount of time was equal to half of the daily volume that it usually sees during normal trading hours. But this is huge. Another California bank, $600 billion worth, blows up the same day they put sound and resilient in the Fed's statement. You couldn't make this up. Keep in mind, during the FOMC, Jerome Powell didn't say anything about saving these banks or anything. The furthest that he went was to say the banks are safe and sound, basically. Sound and resilient. And then immediately we saw basically 2 more banks collapse. And we're going to look at that in a second here. But it's too perfect, right? Banking system is sound and stable. And then we see this, a total and complete collapse. But this is huge as well. So at this rate, the way they were going right now, what there will be a handful of quasi-nationalized too big to fail banks that have a complete oligopoly on banking. As you can see here, back in like the late 80s or early 90s, almost 15,000 banks. We're down to less than 5,000. And this trend is obviously going to continue going that way, right? Based on everything we're seeing. But let's take a look here. This is PacWest Bancorp. This is today. You can see this massive amount of volume. Yeah, I believe what it was is the amount of volume we saw after hours was equivalent to like just massive amounts, an insanely large, unusual amount of after-hours volume we saw, and Bancorp getting completely gobbled. Potentially, by the end of the week, it'll probably be maybe JP Morgan will buy it or something, right? As to be expected. We also see here Western Alliance not doing very well either. And this is really a trend. A lot of regional banks are completely getting smashed. And guys, as I've been saying, I don't think we're anywhere close to this being done. Literally, my last video yesterday, I said maybe 100 times, not 100 times, maybe like 10 times. This is just the beginning of the banking crisis, not the end of it, which is what the Fed and the government would have you believe. Although I don't think they actually believe that. I think they're just begging you to believe that. Because if they can at least convince you that more banks aren't going to collapse, maybe banks won't collapse. They still will, most likely, but they're just trying to convince you everything's fine. Guys, I mean, does anyone believe that? Okay, nobody believes that. Inflation's transitory. No, it's not, right? Everything they've basically telegraphed and said over the past year and a half has been completely wrong from the Fed and the government. So when you hear the government tell you the banks are fine, when you hear Jerome Powell tell you the banks are fine, it literally means the opposite. It means the banks are not fine. Okay, it's that simple. So many things in finance, apparently you just do the opposite of what government officials will tell you or what Jim Cramer tells you. Whatever Jim Cramer tells you, whatever Jerome Powell tells you, whatever the government tells you, basically the truth is the exact opposite of that. And it's unfortunate, but that seems to be reality at this point. If we look at Bitcoin on the daily chart, however, this is our very first potential bust. We only have moments until a daily close here, but potential bust above the 21-day moving average. And it'll be interesting to see where we get a daily close. Bitcoin, we have to see if Bitcoin can break above 30K, because none of this matters unless Bitcoin is able to recapture 30K. Longer term time frame, we just saw the very first tick on the 30-day, the monthly chart for Bitcoin. After we got this cross, the very first tick of the MACD into bullish momentum. So if that is a sign for things to come, Bitcoin could absolutely rocket up over these next couple of weeks. Also, on the 10-day chart for Bitcoin, we are still straddling, trying to hold on to this very key long-term moving average on the 10-day chart for Bitcoin, 21 moving average on the 10-day chart. And again, I'm not going to get excited until we can actually breach above 30K. 30K is going to be hard resistance, I believe. It already has been for the past couple of weeks that we've been trading there. A lot of volume there. If we flip 30K, this can get bullish very fast, but we have to concretely flip 30K. If we go to the daily chart, you can see on these shorter term time frames, yes, it is possible that we've set ourselves up for a bounce here, but that remains to be seen. Again, I personally believe that the reason we're seeing this momentum, the timing would agree with me, is simply because we're seeing more banks fail and people fearful of the banks. Bitcoin has done really well every time that comes into the news. Every time we hear about a bank not doing well, Bitcoin starts doing well. And the DXY looks absolutely pitiful. It looks as though it's about to completely plummet here. So that's very important. It's so weak, and if quantitative easing truly begins, expect the dollar to get completely smashed. The reason the dollar had so much strength was because of quantitative tightening, or partially. And if that reverses, if we see this pause, if we see this pivot, which I firmly believe we will, one thing the Fed did say, or Jerome did say at the FOMC meeting, is one of the things that was omitted was some of their hawkishness towards continued rate hikes and stuff like that. And again, they absolutely did not really say anything very concrete about a pause or a pivot. In fact, they specifically highlighted that he wasn't saying that. But again, you cannot take what they say at face value whatsoever. I think everything that was telegraphed to me and many people that I listen to and I value their opinions as well is that I don't think the Fed really has a choice here. I think they have to stop. I think they should have stopped before today's rate hike, and they didn't. I think that they should have stopped even potentially before the one before today, but they didn't. And again, we see why though. We see how this is affecting banks, credit, money contraction. It's crazy here. Stock market is actually down today as well. Didn't take the news great. But again, as we've seen, Bitcoin has been doing pretty well despite the fact the stock market hasn't really trended upwards. As well, if we continue to see this banking crisis unfold over the next few weeks, which I think we will, that's what I've been saying for weeks. And again, look, every week, there's hints of new banks failing, and it just so happens this week specifically we got more than one fail. The writing is on the wall, and what's going to happen even if they pause here, I still think more and more banks are in trouble. And Bitcoin itself is shifting into a very potentially bullish position as the world, or at least the banking sector, is not looking good. If Bitcoin decouples and starts performing well while banks start collapsing, it is a golden recipe for price targets for Bitcoin to the upside that are just simply not possible without banks collapsing. Meaning, if banks start collapsing, I believe the prices that Bitcoin can hit, if things truly start to shift, again, it's not gonna be just as simple as a bank will collapse and Bitcoin pumps, although it kind of seems like it is that simple so far, because it has been. But the process, the decoupling, that if Bitcoin truly does continue decoupling from this, then price targets for Bitcoin can get a lot higher than I think a lot of people realize. And even myself, I personally see Bitcoin around the next top the next bull cycle, what I think is a reasonable price for Bitcoin is somewhere between 150 to 250,000, and really that's only like a 2x to a 3x of the previous highs. Previous highs were around 70, so if it goes to 150, that's like pretty much a 2x, and if it would go to 210, that's like a 3x. That's not crazy. In the past, that's actually considered a very conservative price target for the next bull cycle. But I think those numbers can be pumped up a lot if Bitcoin starts performing during a banking crisis that we've never seen before since Bitcoin's existed. I think things really can change. And currently I'm up a little over 20,000 USDT in profit. If you guys are interested in trading, make sure to sign up with the links below for limited time bonuses and 0 fees when trading with spot. Without any further ado, it's free.